Yo, yo, and yo. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh, let me pause it. Okay, what's happening, everybody? Check, 1, 2. Is this thing on?
Yo, yo.
Oh, it must be because I'm hearing myself.
Oh,
Let's not watch yourself there, Spags. All right. Okay, happy Friday. Happy Friday. That camera's just a little bit off. Sorry, I'm really picky with this. Sorry. I'm Dowie. All right, so it's Friday. I've got a smoothie. I've got my computer. I've got a bunch of boxes on my workbench, and I think I'm gonna unbox some clock parts today. And I've got the chat on. Yeah, go Broncos, right? I've got the chat on YouTube. That's where I'm going to get questions from today. But I am actually doing a simulcast on YouTube and Facebook, so wherever you happen to be, hello. And I'll also go back on Facebook, because it's easy to do that, and answer questions that I wasn't able to answer during the show. I did that last week. It worked out really well. So hey, let's get to it. So coming up pretty soon, my next project I'm going to start is a grandfather clock. Now, I've never built a grandfather clock, but don't let that, don't let that stop me from building it, because you got to build it once at some point, right? You got to build it the first time at some point. So the thing is, when I chose this project, I was really completely uninformed about how much money the clock parts cost. And I'm basically talking about everything that is not woodworking. And that can actually be a big deterrent. So curious if any of you have ever gotten into that situation where you're like, oh, I've got this great idea for a project, only to realize that the hardware for that project, the things you can't make yourself, are ridiculously expensive. I think the Rubo bench is a good example. If you want to use like bench crafted hardware, you're going to spend more on the hardware than you spent on the wood. And this clock project is kind of one of those deals, right? So just from what I bought here, and I'm sure I could shop around and maybe get better pricing, but it's about $750, $800 for the clock parts, and that doesn't include the wood. So yay, right? But let me tilt the camera down. See if I can't give you guys a little visibility on what we're playing with here. Oh, let me get the laptop out of the way. Now, I've sort of opened some of these ahead of time just so I don't have to do it on camera, but I haven't looked at everything. All right, and I'll answer questions later, so if you ask questions now, probably not the best time because I can't see the chat. All right, so this is box 2 of 4, because going out of order is cool. Now you guys know, grandfather clock, right? Got all those cool internal parts, beautiful, brass usually, really cool stuff. This looks like the weights. All right, now of course these are ugly, so you put these in a case and they look a whole lot nicer, but I don't know exactly how much it is, maybe about 10 pounds? That's pretty substantial. And there's 3 of those, 2 of one size, looks like one of a slightly larger size. A little heavier. Wonderful. This thingy, this looks like the, I don't know what the terminology is for all this stuff, so anyone who knows clocks will laugh at me as I go through this process, but we're going to call these the chime bar thingies. All right, so this is what the little hammers hit to get the chime as the clock, plays its beautiful little songs. Okay, what else we have here? This bad boy, one of the more expensive parts, this is the movement. Right, so you've got the strings and the little pulleys here. This is what you attach your weights to, right? Those are kind of cool. And you've got the little hammers inside there. You know what? Let's cut that open, because plastic is dumb. Just don't want to inadvertently do some damage here. So yeah, there's the movement. There's the cute little hammers. Hammer, don't hurt them. That looks pretty cool. Treat this stuff with a little bit of care here. I got a tube. There's a big tube. All these parts, by the way, I got from a company called Clockit, K-L-O-C-K-I-T. And they seem to have just about anything you could need as a clockmaker. We're going to call this the wooden stick thingy. This is the hickory stick. Actually, it looks like poplar, but it's just the wooden stick that holds the pendulum, I'm guessing. And a little more room here. Get out of the way. Inside here, we've got a couple different things. Looks like miscellaneous hardware and parts to go with it. Inside here, oh, nice, look at that thing. Whoa, baby. All we need is a little clock face right on there and a gold chain, and I could rock it Flava Flav style. So that'd be sweet. Well, maybe I should put the nice side down, huh? Okay, that's cool. What's in here? Oh, you know what? These are the pretty holders. There we go. The nice holders for the weights. So these are empty right now. Okay, that makes sense. Now I'm getting it. I'm understanding. We're getting there, and it looks like the clock face is under here. There's the ugly side with all the pre-drilled holes for the stuff to come through. Check it out. It's kind of pretty. You know what's not pretty? This bent dog-eared corner. But I should be able to hammer that nice and flat. Kind of annoying, but it happens. There's only so much you can do. Well, that looks like it's it. There might be a couple other parts around here that I don't know about, but again, I'm kind of getting into this for the first time, so interesting stuff. So yeah, grandfather clock coming up soon. I got to start the build, and with the whole move that might or might not happen, you know, my schedule's kind of up in the air. But I got to tell you guys, dropping $750, almost $800 for parts before I've even built anything is that's a tough pill to swallow. That's rough. I'm gonna do my best to hopefully try to get in touch with Clockit and see if we can't get them to do some kind of a deal, because we'll obviously send some business their way. Whoops. Oh, that's fine. So that's that. So let me see if there's any questions I can answer. You know, Friday chats like this are just totally informal, go for about 30 minutes or so, and anything you want to ask me, woodworking related or otherwise, you know, very informal, just hanging out, seeing what's going on, drinking smoothies. Let's see, Michael asks, I posted this on Facebook earlier in case I couldn't make this, but was wondering if you've ever bought a woodpecker's one-time tool. What ones? What do you like? Was it worth the extra coin? The one-time tools are a very interesting thing, and I can't say that, you know, you can make a broad statement about them, because it really depends on what you're into, what you want to do, and what you value, so that if you happen to value that particular thing, then the one they make is going to be fantastic. So I do have a couple of one-time tools. Offhand, I got some up here on the wall I could show you. This one is one of my favorites. A big old framing square, but it's a precision framing square. So unlike the big T-square things that you might find at like Home Depot or Lowe's for drywall, this one is just dead accurate. So if you're doing a lot of sheet good cuts and you need, you know, something that's a good square reference, this is fantastic. And I found this to be well worth the asking price. But again, for the work I do, totally. Maybe not for you, you know, so it kind of depends on what you're into. I think I have a set of squares from them as well that are pretty good. You know, they've had a few things here and there and I'm like, oh, that's neat, but I would never spend that amount for that thing. So again, very, very personal decision when it comes to the one-time tools. But I would say about 90% of them, to me, is just overkill for what it is. But no doubt well built, if that makes sense. We are selling the house and the shop. I don't want to talk about that too much because I feel like we've talked about it a lot. So I don't want to annoy people by talking about it too much. But we are trying to move. I don't like the YouTube chat question area. It's like, it only takes up about a quarter of my screen, and I would rather, like, I want more screen real estate taken up with the questions, but I guess if you're viewing, it's a different story. What am I streaming with? Wirecast and my camera. We're streaming 30 frames per second right now. John Pipe wants to know, where do I get the majority of my wood? 2 places here in Phoenix that I go. Spellman Hardwoods for plywood and most domestics. And then I go to Woodworker Source for exotics. And Woodworker Source is really, really overpriced. But if you buy enough quantity, you can get a discount. And they're kind of, in a lot of cases, the only game in town, so I have no choice. But they do have usually a pretty good selection. Matt Lewis says, can you name 3 Harbor Freight things worth buying? Okay, I'll be honest, I don't really shop at Harbor Freight all that much. But there are things that I have purchased from there. I don't know that they sell all these things anymore, but I'll, share those with you. The one thing I have is the little shop crane thing, the cherry picker deal. I use that to move really heavy tools, and that was like a couple $100. I thought that was a pretty good deal. I've never purchased it, but I've heard lots of good things about their dust collector, the Harbor Freight bagged dust collector unit. I think it's a 2 horsepower. I don't know. I don't have one, but I've heard good things about it. People mod it up, and it seems to do pretty well. The other thing was, at one point, they had terry cloth sponges that I like to have on hand for big projects when I have to spread a lot of stain in a hurry. So they're basically absorbent sponges with a terry cloth exterior, and they had those at a really good price. And for staining, where you basically are going to waste this thing, you want those things to be cheap. So those are 3 that come to mind. What do you think of the Incra Super System router system? Steve wants to know. Incra makes great stuff. If you want accuracy, repeatability, the ability to adjust down to, a thousandth, right? You're going to get that with the Incra systems. And on the router, if you need that sort of thing, it will do the job, absolutely, no problem at all. But some of their stuff, I don't feel like I need that level of precision and accuracy. I kind of, do more of an old school method, like the table saw. I tried an Incra fence on there, and it just wasn't right for me, so went back to a little bit more of an old school system. On the router, that's kind of a place where I think it starts to make a whole lot more sense for me personally and my methods of work. So I think the router system is good if you've got the cash to throw at it. But I say this one seems to come up every time we do a show. I've really got to do a video on it to kind of make, sort of put out my final word on it. The Bosch miter saw, the Glide, is working out great. And I really do owe you guys a video to explain what I like about it and kind of how it compares to the Capex. All right, let's see what else. What are the best tools to start out woodwork? Well, that's Mission Intern asked that question. He says, or her, as I have not done a lot and want to start. I think the best thing you should do at this point is do a Google search, right? Search for beginner woodworker tools. You could search my channel or my website specifically for that, and I have a video explaining what tools I think are good to kind of get the ball rolling. And that's probably, look at a bunch of videos, not just my opinion, look at other people too, because there's different ways you can go. But look at what those people build, look at the way that they work, and see if you can identify, if anything clicks with you as a method that you would like to work or a person's work style you would like to emulate, and then you might want to take their tool recommendations too. But there's lots of information on beginner tools out there that you should be able to find some good advice. I guess, David, that kind of answers your question too. You asked about must-have tools. And as far as projects you should try to build yourself, I try not to restrict projects, especially in the beginning. I think you got to build things that you don't want to set the bar too high, but at the same time, you don't want to limit yourself. I think it's more important to build something you actually want. And this way there's, the stakes are there, right? You are caring about mistakes that you make. And when you make those mistakes, the lesson will be much more palatable. It'll make a lot more sense and it'll stick with you. So that's why I don't recommend doing too much practice in woodworking. Make your practice an actual project that you care about. And if you do that, you find that your learning curve is a lot less steep, right? Because you're kind of these things matter, and you care because you don't want to waste the wood and you want to make a good project. And I just find if you spend all day just practicing different cuts and making sample mortise and tenons, not that that's a waste of time, but I think your time would be better spent putting that into a project and actually making something. And if the final product isn't up to your standard and you don't really love it, guarantee you someone in your family or a friend of yours will gladly accept your, less than perfect project for if you're just giving it away. Right? Someone will appreciate it. Adrian wants to know how loud is the 5 horsepower cyclone outside with the new venting? I haven't put a sound meter on it, but it's not that bad. I mean, if you're standing right there, it's probably not the most comfortable thing to stand next to. But if you've got a lot of open area like I do, sound just kind of dissipates with distance. So it's not that loud at all. Steve says he's addicted to buying tools. He thinks or wants to know if it's a problem. I think if you ask the folks here and the folks in the chat and you ask me, I think if you're looking to stop, that's probably the wrong group. I think we're a bunch of enablers. Javier says, what's your next project? I just actually talked about it. The grandfather clock, tall case clock. Most challenging project I've done so far, R. James wants to know. Probably the Maloof rocker. That was definitely up there in the challenge department. Someone says I could pop out the chat. I don't see, there it is. Whoop. Yeah, boy. Thank you. Thank you for teaching me something that I didn't know. Excellent, that's much better. Now I can kind of just focus on the chat. Much appreciated. Any recommendations on finishing cherry? What finish would look good? Clan Campbellson wants to know. If you put a clear coat, be it a water-based, oil-based, or a lacquer on cherry, it's kind of hard to go wrong. Cherry's just gorgeous. You do have to watch a little bit for blotching, so if you try to hit it with a stain, you may get sort of light and dark contrast on there. Oil-based finishes may give you the appearance of some blotchiness that some people like. Other people don't care. They just say get over it, like, what's his name? Glenn Huey. I think he was the one who said, cherry blotches, get over it, which is awesome. So you might take some precautions with maybe a coat of de-waxed shellac before you hit it with any top coat if you're afraid of what blotch you might see. But ultimately, cherry just looks gorgeous with just about any finish. So I say apply the finish you're most comfortable applying to get good results. And cherry will just kind of do the rest. Edgar, what brand would you suggest for a 14-inch bandsaw? Kind of depends on your budget, right? You can get 14-inch in just about any consumer brand. And a lot of them are going to be really pretty darn good. I think if you're looking for a good bang for the buck, maybe look at Grizzly and Rikon. You want to go on the other end of the scale, look at, of course, Powermatic. Jet might be a little bit cheaper. And trying to think. Other companies that are sort of known for their larger bandsaws, like Laguna, I'm not sure what their offering is in that smaller size range. You have to take a look. It's not something that's very well researched or at the top of my mind at the moment. I haven't really been looking into them. Keith Weigel has a good question. If it were not a source of primary income for you, how do you think you would stay motivated to be in the shop? I find I get distracted very easily. Here's the thing. If you don't have to be in the shop for monetary reasons, if it's not part of your income, I don't know why anybody worries too much about it. I hear the same thing in like the world of video games, where people will call into shows or podcasts and they'll be like, oh, I'm just losing my love for this particular game, and how do I get myself motivated to play? And I just want to know why you need to be motivated to play. If it's not calling you, then go do something else until it does. I feel like forcing it is not necessarily the way to go. Now for me, there are times where I'm working and I'm building projects, but there are things that really just get me amped up and excited and I want to be in the shop. I actually find that shop projects, building things specifically for the shop, whether it's like chisel racks, like a miter station or this type of storage furniture, I don't know why, something like that improves my shop space gets me excited. And that's something that I find kind of helps me zero in and taps into a little bit of my motivation. But if I didn't have to be in the shop, almost every day, I don't know that I would really worry about it so much. I would go exercise instead of being in the shop, or I would go, pretend I know how to golf, or do something, go play a video game. I wouldn't really force it because there's no reason to. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't, don't. Cesar Moreno, you're asking about good finishes for walnut. I'm going to give you the same answer as for cherry. You got to work hard to mess up walnut. So as long as you have a finish that you can apply well, it's probably going to look good on walnut. Cheaper water-based finishes might not look great because they tend to have that sort of milky consistency and bluish color to them. So I would stay with your lacquer, your oil-based wiping varnish, things along, shellac, things along those lines. All right, let's see. Dan, I'll make a very quick update. Try not to show too much of the tattoos. I'm actually got an appointment next week. I think I probably have 2 more to go, maybe 3 at the most, to finish up the sleeve. So it's going. Wrist is done. This is all done. This is where it starts to fall apart under here. I just got blank spots and things like that, and in the back. So my little water wheel needs a little bit of love there too. So it's coming along. We'll get there soon. Okay. Casey Williams says, hey Mark, first of all, Matt Lewis is a loser. Well, who's Matt Lewis? Did Matt Lewis say something earlier? I don't recall. Secondly, what do you recommend for runners on table saw sleds? Hardwood, Teflon? Answer that real quick. Whatever you have access to. Hardwood is fine, but I think if you have some sort of synthetic material that isn't going to expand or contract, it's probably going to be better. So if you can get it and get a nice fit with it, go with that. But I've used hardwood for all of mine since I've been woodworking, and it's been fine. Oh, and another vote for a table saw safety vid. Yeah, that's becoming a popular request now. I'll see what I can do. I think we could pull that off. Who would win in a fight between Batman and Spiderman? Yeah, I get this question quite a bit. Usually it's like Batman and Superman. And while, Batman's probably a swell guy, he's just a guy, and he's got gadgets. And I don't think gadgets can compete with true superpowers. So I will almost always have Batman lose in a fight to someone who has real superpowers. Henry Sheridan says, I'm a very new woodworker, have only a skill saw, jigsaw, sander, and a handful of hand tools. What can I make with some scrap wood? Lots of things, Henry. And the thing is, again, I hate to push people off to Google like this, but it's such an amazing resource that it wasn't very long ago that it wasn't even there. And all you have to do is type that same question into Google and you might find some really great projects. Just look into some basic projects that you want in your home, things you want to build. And you could do a lot with what you've got there. You might have to get creative, but you can still do a lot. And it's just one Google search away. Google image search is really good for inspiration for projects as well. Oh, great question. Army of Meat. Great question and great name. Do you think you need to learn a lot about tree anatomy and biology to deeply understand woodworking? No, not at all. I mean, I have a degree in biology and I had a strong focus because I was getting into plant genetics. I had a strong focus on plant physiology. And while the reality is I've probably forgotten way more about that than I remember, I don't think any of that is necessary. You'll understand sort of the properties of what wood does and you'll learn it in the shop just by working with the stuff. I would say that an understanding of some of those things can be very useful. You might understand the core reason why things happen, and then you could look at a board and say, you know what, this has the same properties based on its grain structure and things, the same properties as this particular board, and you can kind of predict how the wood is going to react and work. This is something that without a biological, physiological understanding of trees, this is something hand tool users almost learn without realizing it, And that's because if you start taking just blades to wood with manpower, you quickly realize what boards do what and what types of grain respond in a certain way, which ones give you trouble, which ones are better off with a high angle versus a low angle. And all these things relate to the properties of the wood itself. Okay, so hand tool users tend to be very much in touch with that stuff, and it would be interesting if they did take a course on this and then connect the real scientific reasons why their observations show, A, B, and C. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary. You can learn these things and not necessarily know the whys, you just know the what and the how, if that makes sense. Kobe asks, what do you think of True Oil? I've never used True Oil. I've heard of people using it, but I've never had my hands on it. What dovetail router jig do you recommend? That's Tiges de Winter. There's quite a few decent ones, but I don't think you can get much better than Lee Jigs, L-E-I-G-H. Lee Jigs is kind of, as far as I'm concerned, like the company to beat when it comes to dovetail jigs. Their jigs can be a little complicated, but you follow the directions, it'll be fine, but they're like infinitely adjustable, really high quality, and they've got quite a range of products now. So I think, personally, Lee Jigs. Hey, thanks, Greg, and sorry to hear that Greg says he was off for a month because of a table saw accident. Very sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you can at least type, so that's a good sign. Japanese or Western style saws, which do you prefer? Elwin is asking. Well, mostly Western. You can see on my wall back here, I've got some Lee Nielsen saws. But I do have a Dozuki. I do have a couple, I find that that's a good general purpose saw for me. If you like Japanese saws, they can be incredibly versatile. Really, people just prefer one over the other, and if you're having trouble sawing sometimes with a Western saw, maybe try a Japanese saw. Cutting on the pull stroke might be something that just clicks with you, right? Some people love it, some people don't, but there's definitely benefits on both sides. But you can see I definitely favor Western for really precise, joinery cuts most of the time is what I'm using them for. Ludwig is asking what I'm drinking. This is a smoothie made in a Ninja, Ninja blender. It's basically kale, spinach, mango, pineapple, a little bit of flaxseed, a little shot of orange juice, and ice. And a little powder of like green superfood, maybe like a tablespoon of superfood green powder crap that tastes like grass, basically. Steve, how did you manage to get your wife on board with your woodworking passion? I can't, this is one of those things. I don't think I got them to support what you do. I'm not the right person to give you advice on how to convince them. Because Nicole was just super supportive of me from day one, and if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be talking to you in this capacity right now because she encouraged me to quit my job and do this stuff for a living. So, the one thing I will say is if family members, or a spouse is having trouble seeing the value in it, then make more stuff. Frankly, the more you make for people and they see actual usable products, and it's not even about saving money. I mean, it might be. But a lot of times you're not going to necessarily build things to save money, but you're building something useful. And it goes in the house and you have the pride of it being there. Your wife has the pride of it being there. And it's amazing what that does to the mentality and how people feel about the time you spend in the shop. And if that's not enough, I'm no marriage counselor. I can't give you advice on that. If you can't convince them, you can't convince them. But it is what it is. Thankfully, like I said, I had an easy road. Nicole was just super supportive of it from day one. How do you start out designing a project? Pencil, paper, or CAD program? David, good question. Generally, I will start, if it's something kind of weird, I'll start with pencil and paper and then try to get as much of that into SketchUp as possible. SketchUp is the program I use. And if it's something a little bit more, like a cabinet, and I just need to work out some joinery details and dimensions and proportions, I just go right to SketchUp. And that's about as far as I ever really need to go. There are some things that I'm not capable of drawing in SketchUp that I just rely on a pencil and paper, and it works pretty well for me. Ooh, good questions and a lot of them. Let me see if I can make sense of this. Henry wants to know if I have any good woodworking videos for beginners. Yes, Henry, all of them. We have a playlist that I believe is specifically labeled like for beginners or getting started or something like that. So go look for that playlist. But ultimately, this stuff is free. So any woodworking you can observe anyone else doing is a good thing to watch. And it doesn't matter if the project or the skill that they're doing is something you might not be able to do for a year or two. You still have a lot that you could learn from it. So I certainly seek out some of the beginner stuff, but don't focus too hard on that. Just keep watching, get inspired, and see how all these different things are done. You've got, it might be intimidating at this point, I guess, to kind of look for this stuff because there's so much out there. So I guess it can be a blessing and a curse, but ultimately, just keep watching these videos and you'll get a better understanding of how the craft works and how people get these things done. Juan, we are trying to move to Colorado. It's not in stone at this point because we have a house to buy and a house to sell. So it's a little out of our control in that regard. Joseph wants to know where I buy my Japanese chisels and what brand are they? These are Fujihiro chisels from Hida Tool, H-I-D-A, Hida Tool. Beautiful hollows on the back. I just love these things. All right, these are great. Not everybody likes a Japanese chisel. I happen to adore them. One of the reasons I like them, specifically a functional reason other than the fact that they're beautiful and they just work well, is that they are metric. So I like to have my chisels slightly undersized. So let's say I plow 3/4 inch wide dado at the table saw and it's a stopped dado and I need a chisel to fix it. Well, if I have a perfect 3/4 inch chisel, I kind of have a hard time getting that to lay down so it doesn't cross over my dado lines on either side. But if I have a chisel that's metric, the metric equivalent is going to be slightly less than 3/4, and I find that to be much more useful in tuning up joinery that's been done on a power tool. That sort of hybrid woodworking philosophy thing requires me to clean up power tool work with hand tools, and I find that the slightly undersized chisels really help a lot with that. Yeah, good point, Jason. He says the barbecue cart is a good one for beginners. The next 3 projects, barbecue cart and 3 others, for the next few weeks will be focused on very beginner-friendly projects. It's not super fine woodworking. They're all just simple plywood projects, and I think those are all going to go into that category of beginner-friendly weekend projects. Delete Tommy, shop tour video soon. I don't know, man. I might be out of this shop by the time I do a tour of it. I never did a shop tour because I never finished the shop. Like there's always things I want to still do. So I've been holding off for years now, and it doesn't look like I'm ever going to get to the point of calling it done before we wind up going somewhere else. Let's see, it's matic plane or a shoulder plane. These are things that can really help you fine-tune joinery that you cut. That's probably where I would look into. Of course, card scrapers or a cabinet scraper is a really good option too to help clean up surfaces that you've planed. And I think for hand tools, that's really about it. I mean, you can go nuts with it, but you're pretty much covered like the big 4 that I think are important. Mark says, I saw a drum kit in one of your videos. Are you a drummer? I am a person that owns a drum kit who occasionally sits on it and makes noise. I hesitate to call myself a drummer. Yeah, I used to play in high school and college. Now I just have it in here for stress relief and I play for fun, but I'm not actively, playing in a band. Oh, Greg, I would not be interested in seeing your graphic pictures of your table saw accident. I've seen enough of those. I'm good. They all kind of start to look like cherry pie. I don't like cherry pie. I'm an apple pie kind of guy. M. Holt wants to know, what brand of jigsaw blades do you use? Are there such a thing as high-quality woodworkers' blades? I don't know if there's anything other than, what you can get at like Lowe's, Home Depot. I usually just get Bosch blades. When I was using Festool's jigsaw, their blades were really good. But for the most part, all I use on a jigsaw is either a metal cutting blade or a very fine-toothed, something with a lot of teeth, something that'll cut nice and clean whether it's plywood or solid wood. And then a third one is a nice, long, aggressive blade with a lot of space between the teeth so that I can use that to break down like 8/4 stock and get it to manageable size so that I can then mill it. But I never found the brands that I use to be disappointing. Bosch makes good blades. Kishan Patel, have you done any projects with your kids? I've done a few, little things. My son's only 4 years old. So, every parent has to decide when the right time is, to put sharp objects in your kids' hands. There are certain things I trust him with and certain things I don't. So we are, though, getting to the point where I think he's ready to come in and at least drive a few nails with a hammer and start making stuff. And we've done like the little, how Lowe's and Home Depot have the weekend kids workshops. We've done those. And those are silly basic stuff. You're just knocking a few things together with some nails. So it's a matter of just doing something that keeps waiting for the magic point where his interest is strong enough to keep him in here to get something done, a completed thought. He's very flighty and all over the place at this point. Hey! David from Make Something says, please shoot a goodbye shop video when you leave. I did one of those on the last shop. I think I even used like copyrighted music at the end of it because it was too funny not to. Yeah, I'll have to do that. It'll be a little sad, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's not that sad. Bottom line is, as long as I have a place to do woodworking, I'm going to be fine. Honestly, the thing I'm the most sad about, I think, leaving here is just this is where we had our kids. So there's a lot of those memories and things we've done here with the kids, and even this shop. My son was probably like 6-7 months old, I think, when the shop was being built, and I've got pictures of him crawling on the floor in here. So even the shop is something I tie and connect to my kids. So leaving that behind is like a chunk of our lives, moving on to the next chapter, which is always a big deal. But yeah, I'll do some kind of a goodbye video for sure. I'll show it empty. That'll be fun. Josh Harrison, is there any aspect of woodworking that you haven't explored but have always wanted to? Man, Josh, there's a lot of areas of woodworking that I haven't explored, or at least haven't explored thoroughly. So I'd like to get more into marquetry. I'd like to get more into doing some complicated inlay work. I'd like to do more turning. I'd like to do more scroll saw work. There's just so many areas of woodworking, and when you teach people, it generally speaking, for what we do at the Wood Whisperer, it doesn't really help us business-wise for me to focus on one thing too long. So I tend to multitask and get my hands into a lot of things, so I can be pretty good at a lot of things, kind of the jack of all trades sort of deal, while not being, masterful at anything, just because I have to keep bouncing from one thing to the next. Craig wants to know if I'll get the guys who built my current shop to build a new shop. Absolutely not. Those guys are based in Arizona. I don't think I want to pay for them all to travel to Colorado. That said, I also don't think I'm going to be building a new shop. In all likelihood, I am going to probably find the biggest 3-car garage I can find, and Nicole will continue to park outside. So there will be like a shop, I won't call it a renovation, but a shop like, making it appropriate for woodworking. So that's electrical, insulation, modifying the doors if I need to, or replacing the doors, whatever it takes. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. I like to keep these to about a half hour, roughly. We're a little over that. Let's see. S. Mason, real quick, answer a couple more. Besides being time consuming, are there any problems with making an end grain cutting board with small pieces? Yes and no. End grain cutting boards by nature, because you've got all those glue joints and all these pieces are sort of, a lot of times the grain gets mismatched and, it gets wet a lot. So you're causing the wood to expand and contract. So end grain boards suffer from this tendency to bow, to warp, to do unpredictable things because of the nature of how these tiny pieces are all glued together. Also the fact, the smaller those pieces are, well, actually even on big pieces, it can still be an issue, but if you have all those little tiny joints, I think, at least my gut tells me that you're actually creating something that's somewhat weak. Imagine taking a really small, one made up of a bunch of small pieces, cutting board, and just cracking it over your knee. How hard do you think you would have to do that to bust that thing apart? Not very hard, right? So that's something I think about. But then again, how often are you taking a cutting board and doing this with it? Maybe dropping it on the kitchen floor, that could be a factor. So I think stability would be your biggest enemy. And of course, just overall weakness could be a problem. But yeah, it's gonna be a pain. But don't let that stop you from doing it. A lot of people treat their cutting boards very nicely. They don't soak them. They don't get them very wet. They know, assuming they know how to take care of them, there's a good chance that it'll be okay. Yeah, I am going to need that AC in Colorado. Heat pump, baby. Looking for a natural oil finish. Disc Guy Joe wants to know, natural oil finish for a dining tabletop? Hickory is the choice of wood. There's a couple different companies you could try. Look at Tried and True and their series of finishes. They've got one with wax in it. There's one they call like a Danish oil and one that they call a varnish. They're all natural oil finishes, non-toxic. I don't think an oil is really the greatest finish for a dining table or something that's going to be used frequently. But I can see the argument for doing it depending on your needs. So, but that's what I would try. Tried and True would be a good place to start. But there's other brands, of course. David Ferrer, what's the worst woodworking accident you've had? Had a couple minor ones. I nicked my finger on a bandsaw blade once. Thankfully, it just started to cut into the nail. Didn't need stitches or anything. Had a little bit of kickback on a jointer when I was first starting woodworking. I've told this story before, but I ran a 6-inch board end grain over the jointer because I just needed to trim a little bit. And I figured, we use it to trim a little bit off of the width of a board, right? If you just need to buzz a tiny little bit, you can go over to the joiner and remove that. So I figured, hey, why not do it on end grain, right? That makes sense. So I ran the board end grain, blade hit the end grain at the wrong angle, smacked it right into my hand, and just had a nice big blood blister on my finger. And something special in my drawers. And let's see what else. I think that's really about it. I've had a couple of scary kickbacks at the router, but other than that, nothing really too notable or eventful. Yeah, Philip, I've got mini splits in here. I've got 3 interior units, 2 exterior. They're both heat pumps. Those are fantastic. That's what I plan to do in Colorado as well. All right, so I think that wraps it up for today. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to continue doing this every Friday unless something gets in the way of me doing it, but I don't foresee that happening in the future. But thank you for joining me. And if you like these, let me know. Give me a thumbs up. I mean, it's a talky video. A lot of people don't like that, but if you're here to enjoy it during the actual live session, probably, it might be cool. I don't know. But let me know. Let me know what you think. If you don't want me to do them anymore, too bad. I've got nothing else to do, so. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. And, yeah, stay cool. Where's the off button on this thing?